Hey, I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my predictions for UFC Fight Night 83, Silva versus Bisping, which happens on UFC Fight Pass on February 27th. Before I get into that, though, I'd like to plug my own author's website at www.chrismoldong.com. I am an aspiring author who specializes in the fantasy genre, and on my website, you can check out blogs, which are updated weekly, the Writers Talk web series, which is just me talking everything about writing. Free short stories. There's a new one called The Snake Thief out right now that you guys can read. And stories for sale. You can also support me by buying my first novel, which is a fantasy adventure called The Mustard Prince in the Convent Kingdom, for $8.95 on my website at www.chrismoldong.com. So yeah, check that out when you can. Okay, on to this card. I like this card. I think that the main event is intriguing. The co-main event is solid and evenly matched. You get to see Tom Breese. He's a prospect to watch out for. Francisco Rivera versus Brad Pickett. Fun action fight. Mr. Finland makes his return. He's actually a pretty solid fighter in Mike Wilkinson. I got some prospects here. I kind of consider Davey Grant, the return of Davey Grant from The Ultimate Fighter. He's fighting a prospect in Marlon Vera. Scott Askham. Arnold Allen, he's a solid prospect. Krzysztof Jotko. He's fighting Brad Scott, who's actually not a bad prospect himself. Rustam Khabilov, he's a good prospect. 20 fights at this point, not really a prospect anymore. He's fighting Norman Parke, solid fighter. Got some heavyweights too. Got a new heavyweight and Jarjis Danho, undefeated, huge for the weight class. He's fighting Danho Omielanczuk. Pretty decent prospect, and Teemu Pekkalin. He's fighting as well. And Martin Svensson fights David Timur. I'll call him Timur. They're both new to the UFC. Don't really, can't really call Svensson a prospect at this point. He's been fighting for like 8 years, and he's 30 years old, with almost 20 fights. So he's not really a prospect. Timur though, he's only been fighting since like 2000, like 14 or 13 or something like that. Maybe. He hasn't been fighting very long. He's still a prospect though. Okay, let's get started. Michael the Count Bisping fights Anderson the Spider Silva. Okay, Michael Bisping, 27-7 record, 15 wins by KO or TKO, 4 wins by sub. Has those 2 losses by KO or TKO. 36 years old. He's 6-2 on a 2-fight win streak. Most recently beat Thales, if I'm not mistaken. Trains out of HB Ultimate. Former Bellator champ. Brendan Halsey trains there as well. He is an Ultimate Fighter winner. At his best, his cardio is really strong. He can go 5 hard rounds. With good kickboxing. He's very high output. He's not like a one-punch knockout type guy. But like he throws a lot of combinations and just throws a lot. His takedown defense is strong. His ability to scramble back to his feet is really strong as well. Anderson the Spider Silva, 33-6 record with 1 no contest. 20 wins by KO or TKO, 6 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO or TKO and 2 losses by sub. 40 years old, he's 6'2". He last fought in January of 2015 against Nick Diaz in a 5-round fight. He is a former UFC middleweight champion and a former consensus #1 pound-per-pound MMA fighter, according to like a lot of websites and whatnot. At his best, he has really strong Muay Thai. Has that hands-down style boxing where he slips and counters and whatnot. He's mainly a counter striker, actually. But he does have really strong kicks, strong knees. He is a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. His takedown defense isn't that great. His chin is deteriorating, and if the Nick Diaz fight's any indication, like say he's declining. Okay, so, it's Anderson Silva. I can't pick against the guy. I did against Weidman the second time, but I'd probably pick him against some of these newer guys. But you gotta say, Michael Bisping, he still looks solid. He's still that gatekeeper to the top 5. And he has a real chance of beating Anderson Silva. He really does. He can just outwork Anderson Silva for 5 rounds. Anderson, in his fight against Nick Diaz, just looked human. I mean, he just looked like kind of run of the mill, and then you can kind of see the greatness here and there. Still hits hard, but like, you know, it's just one of those things. He just looks like he's declining. You know, his chin's not as good as it used to be and whatnot as well. With that said, I am still going to go with Anderson Silva to win this one, probably by KO or TKO. I think a decision favors Bisping. I'm not super confident in this pick whatsoever. I actually think Bisping has a really good chance here. I know it's easy to underestimate Bisping. His personality to some is not the greatest, but I like the guy. I don't mind the guy at all. But he is a solid fighter. I mean, he only loses to like Rockhold. Um, he'd probably lose to Weinman or Jacare or like some of those guys. Some of those guys. He'd probably lose to Romero, maybe Machida. And that's about it. And then all his losses tend to be like to some very good fighters. Anderson, I mean, at his prime, was the top fighter out there. I mean, and during his prime, Anderson, easy, knockout. This time, hesitantly saying Anderson Silva by KO or TKO. Next fight of that, Thales Leites fights Gegard Mousasi. Another fight that's actually really hard for me to call. Thales Leites has a 25-5 record, 4 wins by KO or TKO, 14 wins by sub, 34 years old. They're both the same height, actually, both 6'1". Leites trains out of Novo now and is a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has some really strong back control, too. Once he takes it back, he's a backpack. His offensive takedown ability is pretty solid. He has a good trip takedown. His stand-up's actually really improving, too. He's even showing some power in his strikes. His chin's actually held up really well. I mean, he's been in some battles. Tim Bo's battle. He's taking some solid hits. I remember when he first came to UFC, he fought like Martin Kampman and was getting beat up on the feet. And Leites wouldn't go down. Gegard Mousasi, 37-6 record with 2 draws, 19 wins by KO or TKO, 12 wins by sub. Has those 3 losses by submission, 30 years old. He is a former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion with some strong kickboxing. Good chin, kind of cracked against Uriah Hall, but it was still like a jumping, spinning back kick and a flying knee, He has some strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills himself. He's good on the ground, and his ground and pound is actually solid as well. His takedown defense is still the weakest point, one of his weakest points, but it is improving. Like I said, tough one for me to call, actually. I think these two are around the same level. Leites, if he gets a fight to the ground, maybe he makes this look like the Jacare fight, where he, kind of like punches his way into a takedown, gets a takedown, gets dominant positions, and it's done. Leites, honestly, could do that. I think it's not outside the realm of possibility. Mousasi, though, for all his faults, that lost to Uriah Hall, I don't think anyone expected that. He's still a really good fighter. Stand-up solid, he hits pretty hard. He should have more tools on the feet than Leites. And, he got just schooled by Jacare on the ground. But, Mousasi, at his best, is still pretty strong on the ground. Tough one for me to call because I think Leites might be able to take Mousasi down. I really do. I don't know how long he can keep him there, though. That's another thing. I'm hesitantly going to pick Gegard Mousasi here by decision. It's just one of those things where Leites has improved enough where, like, his stand-up isn't a liability. If anything, it's kind of a strength now. He's actually pretty decent there now. Not great, just he can definitely hold his own now in the stand-up. And his ground game's always been something to watch out for. Mousasi, You know, just a little more variety in the stand-up. The fact that his takedown defense is still not the strongest. It's improving, but still not the strongest. Going up against a really strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Leites. Um, it makes me a bit hesitant to pick Mousasi here, but I'll go with him to win this one by decision. Next fight, that Tom Breese fights Keitaro Nakamura. Excuse me. Nakamura, 31-6 record with 2 draws and 1 no contest. 6 wins by KO TKO, 16 wins by sub. He's 31 years old. Shorter fighter at 5'11". He's on a 5-fight win streak. Has some strong Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills. Good offensive takedowns. Stand-up's average, and he's still a bit hittable too. I mean, he was losing that fight against Jingeng Lee until he got that sub, which was an awesome sub. Tom Breese, 9-0 undefeated record. 3 wins by KO TKO, 6 wins by sub. 24 years old. He's 6'3", training out of TriStar. He is a finisher. Dude is huge for 170, man. That guy looks like a freaking light heavyweight. I mean, this guy is big. I mean, he's 6'3", first of all, which heavyweights are 6'3", you know? Like, he's huge for the weight class. He's got some good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills himself. Actually, in the regional scene, he was more of a wrestler, grappler type. Lately, though, man, he's shown some real improved stand-up, knocking out freaking guys like Cathal Pendred, who's notoriously tough. Regardless of what you think about the guy, he is a tough guy. And he knocked him out in the first round. Tom Breese, easy. I know upsets are happening a lot lately. I'd be really surprised if Tom Breese loses this fight. I mean, yeah, Nakamura's way more experienced. The size thing, first of all, I mean, I don't know how Nakamura gets past that size difference. They're going to look like 2 different weight classes come fight night. Really, Tom Breese is going to look like a middleweight fighting a lightweight. Like, that's probably how it's going to look. Tom Breese, I'm going to go by knockout again. I think he can beat Nakamura up on the feet. I think that's his best way to win anyways. As far as that, Francisco Rivera fights Brad One Punch Pickett. Pickett, 24-11 record, 7 wins by KO TKO, 10 wins by sub. Also has 2 losses by KO TKO and 4 losses by sub. 37 years old on a 3-fight losing streak. Trains out of ATT. He's only won 2 of his last 7 fights. The thing with him, he's very game and super resilient. His strength, I mean, he likes to box and brawl, but his strength is actually in his grappling. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is strong. He's a good wrestler. On his feet, he's something of a brawler with really weak stand-up defense. And his chin, I think, is actually deteriorating. And then, he got knocked out cold by Thomas Almeida. I mean, chins don't get better, And then he gets rocked a lot, too, I believe Henry Briones was supposed to fight Pickett, and that was a much easier fight than Francisco Rivera. So it's Francisco Rivera, 11-5 record for 1 no contest, 8 wins by KO TKO, 3 wins by decision. Also has 3 losses by sub, 34 years old. He's only won 1 of his last 4 fights. Most recently losing like the round of the year against John Lineker, taking this fight on short notice. His boxing's good, but, dude, he can get lulled into brawls. I mean, it showed in the Lineker fight, but it shows in other fights, too. Like, he'll be technical, and then, like, once a brawl happens, he just gets sucked into the brawl. He is pretty heavy-handed, though, and his takedown defense is greatly improved. And his chin's actually pretty good, too. I don't think this is a good fight for Pickett, just because I think Francisco might be, on a technical level, a better boxer. Still has a sturdier chin than Pickett at this point. I gotta go Francisco Rivera to win this one. I'm actually gonna call knockout too. I can see both these guys being sucked into a brawl, and that makes the fight 50-50. But like I said, I still think Francisco Rivera's chin is still there, Whereas Pickett, I mean, I think, like I said, he's a guy that gets rocked. Even if he's not knocked out or knocked down, he's still rocked a lot. He gets rocked in a lot of his fights. Pickett, though, he could use his wrestling and grappling to get the win here. It would not surprise me. But I'll go Francisco Rivera. I think he can defend the takedowns, and I think he can beat up Pickett on feet. So Francisco Rivera by KO or TKO. Okay, on to prelims. Makwan, Mr. Finland, Amirkhani fights Mike the Warrior Wilkinson. So Wilkinson, 9-1 record, 3 wins by KO TKO, 4 wins by sub, 20 years old, he's 5'8". He last fought in October of 2014. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say it's the fight where he knocked out Backstrom. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's the fight where he knocked out Backstrom. I actually rewatched one of his earlier UFC fights, just get an idea of like what he has. His stand-up's good. He's really aggressive though. I didn't realize how much he just like pushes forward. His overall grappling game's good. Like he'll try. His takedowns aren't super technical, but he's pretty relentless about getting them, and he's decent on the ground. Yeah, I mean he got tapped by Hunted Jason. It's not a good look for his grappling. By a triangle choke that seemed a bit like not much like crazy setups or anything like that, but he's not terrible on the ground though. Amirkhani, 12-2 record, 1 win by TKO, 9 wins by sub, 27 years old, taller fighter at 5'11", on a 3-fight win streak. With Amirkhani, he has some pretty strong. He's a pretty good wrestler. His Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills are good. He has a really good front choke, good back take, and stand-up is improving too. With that said, I'll go with Amirkhani to win this one by submission. I think he can take Wilkinson down and get that sub. Next fight off that, dangerous Davey Grant fights Marlon Vera. Grant, 9-2 record, 1 win by TKO, 8 wins by sub. Has his 2 losses by submission, 30 years old. He's a finisher. He's never been past the second round. He last fought Chris Holdsworth back in November of 2013. So he's got a pretty long layoff. His grappling game's good. I mean, I remember his takedowns being mainly like against the cage. His stand-up was just average at best, but he's pretty good on the ground. Marlon Vera, 7-2 record with 1 draw, 1 win by KO, 5 wins by sub, 23 years old. He's trading wins and losses. He's got a pretty solid Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game himself. He actually tapped out his Roman Salazar, if I'm not mistaken. By what, triangle armbar, if I'm not mistaken? His stand-up's actually steadily improving, but his takedown defense isn't very good. He's a guy, I think his last 2, right? Yeah, like all of his fights in the UFC, it looks like he's been taken down by his opponent. This one was hard for me to call because they're both like kind of that lower tier fighter. I can't ignore the fact that Grant's been out since November 2013, and Cheeto, he looks like he's just progressively getting better. And he's just more active, like he's been fighting more frequently. So with that said, I'll go with Marlon Vera to win this one by decision. Can't really say what he's gonna do though. I would say he can maybe do well on the feet against Grant. The problem is I can see Vera get taken down, and I can't really see him get like a triangle choke on Grant, so I'm not like super confident in this pick. But once again, I don't know how rusty or not rusty Grant's gonna be. What's he gonna look like, So with that said, yeah, Marlon Vera by decision. Next fight off that, Scat Askham fights Dempsey. Dempsey, 11-3 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 3 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO TKO. 28 years old, he's 5'10", trading losses and wins. I think he most recently got knocked out, right? Yeah, I think so. His stand-up, average, nothing that great, but he's actually a pretty good wrestler, decent ground and pound. Scott Askham, 13-2 record, 8 wins by KO TKO, 2 wins by sub, 27 years old. He's 6'3", trading losses and wins as well. Was recently losing to Jotko. He's a good kickboxer, but mainly the strength really, I think, is his knees and his infighting. His boxing range, he's not that good at boxing range. He doesn't punch well at range, despite him being really tall, and he doesn't really move his head very well. you know, um, he's an inside striker from what I've seen. Um, his grappling, I'd say it's just average. So with that said, though, I'm gonna go scout Askham to win this one by KO or TKO. Tough for me to call in the sense that I can see Dempsey possibly just taking the fight to the ground and just ignoring a stand-up battle. But nonetheless, I still think Scott Askham can keep the fight on the feet, beating him up, especially if he gets inside, gets him those knees going, and get the knockout. So Scott Askham by KO or TKO. Next fight, that Arnold Almighty Allen fights Yaotzin Meza. Yaotzin Meza, 21-10 record with 1 no contest. 5 wins by KO or TKO, 7 wins by sub. He has 3 losses by KO or TKO and 3 losses by sub. 35 years old, training out of MMA Lab. He's a good wrestler. Good, solid Brazilian jiu skills. His stand-up's average. He's pretty much like a gatekeeper type at this point. Arnold Allen, 10-1 record, 5 wins by KO or TKO, 3 wins by sub, 22 years old on a 3-fight win streak. So I really want this fight against Alan Omer, actually. His boxing's solid, he uses combinations well, and his wrestling's actually not too bad as well. Pretty good scrambler, too. This is going to be a good test for Arnold Allen, actually. I think Yaotzin Meza is just one of those guys that's really experienced, good everywhere, but not great at any one aspect of MMA. He can be outdone in like his strengths, like on the ground, for example, and whatnot. I think Arnold Allen has good enough wrestling. I think he can beat Meza up on the feet. So I am gonna go with Arnold Allen to win this one. I'll go by submission. Yeah, I'll go by sub, like take the back or something like that. So, should be a really good test for Allen. I'm very curious to see how he's going to perform. He's, a young prospect. Next fight after that, Krzysztof Jotko fights Brad Bear Scott. Brad Scott, 10-3 record, 5 wins by KO or TKO, 5 wins by sub. 26 years old, he's 6'1". He is a finisher, trading the wins and losses. I watched rewatched one of his fights. I watched the Michael Kiper fight. Should have probably done like the Dylan Andrews fight. I just couldn't find it. But on Fight Pass, it's hard to navigate that thing sometimes. I should have probably watched that. But he lost. Wait, no, he won that one. The thing with Scott, I mean, he's one of those like good everywhere, but not great at any one aspect of MMA. His stand-up's solid. He can grapple a bit. He's pretty good in clinch. There isn't any particular thing that I saw from him I was like, wow, but, or did he lose to Andrews? I forgot. Anyways, yeah, good ever, not particularly great at any one aspect of MMA, though. Jotko, 16-1 record, 4 wins by KO TKO, 2 wins by sub, 26 years old, he's 6'1" on a 2-fight win streak. Jotko's got a good clinch game. He's not the strongest guy, but sometimes he'll clinch up against a cage. But one thing I saw in his fight against Askham, really improved stand up. He was moving a lot better, boxing a lot better. So I really liked what I saw from Jotko there. He's still not a potent finisher, but I'll go with Krzysztof Jotko to win that one. I think he can use his movement and whatnot. I think he can handle himself in the grappling phases as well. So yeah, Krzysztof Jotko by decision. Next fight after that, Rustam Tiger Khabilov fights Stormin Norman Parke. Norman Parke, 21-4 record with 1 draw, 4 wins by KO or TKO, 12 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by submission. 29 years old. He actually has a judo base. His takedown defense is pretty solid. His stand-up's good, but it's not great. I don't know how else to say it. And it kind of seems like he fades lately, especially in the third round. Rustam Khabilov, 17-3 record, 4 wins by KO TKO, 5 wins by sub. 29 years old on a 2-fight losing streak. Training out of Jackson Winklejohn. He last fought in February of 2015 against Adriano Martins, if I'm not mistaken. Khabilov has that sambo base. His stand-up's good in that like sambo way, where he'll throw like the looping haymakers that are surprisingly accurate. Even through that spinning wheel kick against Masvidal at that one point, and he has really good slams as well. Stylistically, this is actually an interesting matchup because I don't know if Khabilov will have an easy time taking down Parke. And if that's the case, it goes down to the stand-up. I think Khabilov hits harder. Parke might be the more high output striker. Real tough for me to call because, like I said, yeah, I don't know if he can take him down, and if he does take him down, I don't know if he can keep Parke down. I mean, there's Parke's fought like what T-Bow. T-Bow couldn't really take him down, for example. Nonetheless, I'm still going to go with Stan Khabilov by decision. Kind of depends, though. I kind of wonder. I can see this fight taking place on the feet, and if that's the case, it definitely. I think it'd favor Norman Parke a bit more. But nonetheless, Rustam Khabilov by decision. Like I said, I don't know if he can really get those takedowns going on someone like Parke. And that's really the strength of like Khabilov's game. Like his strongest point there. So yeah, yeesh. Tempted to go Norman Parke here, but Parke also just hasn't been looking that great lately, and I can't help but ignore that. Or like, there's no way I can ignore that. Yeah, I'll go with Rustam Khabilov by decision. Can't really say how the fight's gonna go, to be honest with you. Okay, next fight I've got Jarjis Man Mountain Danho fights Daniel Omielanczuk. Danho, 6-0 record with 1 no contest, 4 wins by KO TKO, 2 wins by sub. 32 years old. He's 6'3" and on a 3-fight winning streak. He is a finisher. He's never been to decision, and it's his first fight in the UFC. The guy was a power lifter. He's really strong. The strength of his game is like inside striking. His dirty boxing's good, and when he does want to strike, it's kind of in like a phone booth range. His takedown ability is decent, more strength than technique. He can get reversed. His cardio's not that great either. He's really raw. Pretty athletic though. Daniel Omielanczuk, not the best athlete, but really experienced. 17-5 record with 1 draw and 1 no contest. 3 wins by KO TKO, 9 wins by sub. 33 years old. Shorter fight at 6 foot. His kickboxing is actually pretty solid, and his grappling is, I'd say it's average. I don't say it's great, but I think it's average. Experience-wise and just as far as polished technique goes, I gotta favor Daniel Omielanczuk to win this one. It's heavyweight, and this guy, at the very least, is just a more athletic heavyweight. Danho's a more athletic heavyweight and the bigger heavyweight. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him get like a knockout or something like that, or just gas out after the first round. Whereas Omielanczuk, I've seen him actually go 3 rounds. That's the other thing too. His cardio for a heavyweight's not that bad. And like I said, his skills are not so raw. They're a bit more polished. So I'll go Daniel Omielanczuk. I'll go by submission. One thing I noticed about Danho in the fight I saw against Ventinen, right? I think it was Ventinen. Was that Danho, he was on the bottom and seemed a bit lost down there. And Omielanczuk, pretty solid on the ground, So I'll go Daniel Omielanczuk by submission. Next fight, that Teemu Pekalin fights Lucas Wookie Sajewski. Sajewski, 13-1 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 7 wins by sub. 25 years old. He's 5'8". Striking's average at best. His grappling's not that bad. But the strength of Pakalin's game is his grappling. I remember Sajewski fighting Nick Hine. Couldn't take him down. Couldn't beat him up on the feet or anything like that. And he's going to be a shorter fighter here. Teemu Pakilin, 7-1 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 5 wins by sub, 20 years old, he's 6'1". He is a finisher. Name of his game is his ground game. He was good, pretty good offensive takedown ability. His Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills are solid. He can pass the mount and whatnot. I have seen in some fights where he lost positions on the ground though. His stand-up still needs a lot of work too. He's pretty raw. With that said, I'll go Teemu Pakilin to win that one by submission. I think he can get the fight to the ground. He's a taller fighter. I think he's a better athlete. Um, and I think I can definitely see him staying on top. So, and he's not taking I mean, when he fought Michael Lebu, he fought him on 9 days or 10 days notice or something like that, or 8 days notice. So he gassed pretty quick, but I expect to see a better version of him next time out. So yeah, Pakilin by submission. And finally, Martin Svensson fights David Teemer. Teemer, 3-1 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 1 win by decision. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Trains out of All Stars. It's his first fight in the UFC. So what I saw from him, I saw one fight of his stand-up was good, actually. He threw a good jab. He had pretty good knees. His takedown defense didn't look too bad. Martin Svensson, 14-5 record, 1 win by KO, 8 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO or TKO and 2 losses by sub. 30 years old, he's a taller fighter at 6'1" on a 2-fight win streak. Last fought in August of 2014. It's his first fight in the UFC also. So I actually watched Svensson's fight against Artem Lobov. His kickboxing was alright. He didn't really move his head very well, or at all, and he has a really kick-heavy offense. I mean, he really tries to keep his opponent in the way with his kicks. He's like the taller fighter. One of the biggest problems of his, though, he does back up against a cage a lot. I think a good pressure fighter can beat Svensson pretty easily. I like David Teemer's game better overall. I just don't know if his tools will work against the height and experience of the height of Svensson, and he just doesn't have the experience that Svensson has. Yeah, I can see Svensson possibly keeping Teemer at range. And I didn't see much of both guys' ground game. From what I can tell, I would assume that Svensson's probably a little better on the ground. Most of his wins are by submission, and he's more experienced too. So I'm going Martin Svensson by decision. Tough one for me to call. I actually did like what I saw out of David Teemer. But he's still really inexperienced too, so I think that might work against him. Okay, to recap, I have Anderson Silva beating Michael Bisping by KO or TKO. Gegard Mousasi over Thales Leites by decision. Tom Breese beating Keita Nakamura by KO or TKO. Francisco Rivera over Brad Pickett by KO or TKO. On the prelims, I have Makwan Amirkhani over Mike Wilkinson by submission. Marlon Vera beating Davey Grant by decision. Scott Askham over Chris Dempsey by KO or TKO. Arnold Allen over Yaotzin Meza by, I think I said submission, right? Yeah, submission. Krzysztof Jotko over Brad Scott by decision. Rustam Khabilov beating Norman Parke by decision. Daniel Omielanczuk over Jarjis Danho by submission. Teemu Pakilin beating Lucas Sajewski by submission. And Martin Svensson over David Teemer by decision. So that's it for my predictions for UFC Fight Night 83, Silva versus Bisping. If you have any comments, just leave them below. And please support me and my journey of being a writer by buying my first novel, The Mustard Prince and the Convict Kingdom, for $8.95 on my website at www.chrismaldon.com. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for MMA for You. Thank you guys very much.